Welcome to Perspectives in Peds, or PIP for short, your go-to podcast for insights into paediatric practice. From clinical approaches and emerging research to the everyday wins and challenges, we bring you OT perspectives that inform, inspire and spark conversation. Hello, welcome to Pipcast, Em and Caity.
Hey, Caity.
Hello. Welcome back to the couch. Very nice to have you here.
Thank you.
We are discussing the topic of when schools say everything is fine, which is something that comes across our desks very often.
Quite often.
Yeah, so we thought that this would be a really cool topic to discuss more around what are the things that we think about when we've got families reporting very different experiences to what might be happening at school, as well as what are some of the underlying considerations for why that might be happening, and practically what do we do as clinicians. So I think it's always a little bit of a caveat to say we're talking about our experience as OTs. So this might be very different if you are coming at it more from a speechy angle or a psych angle as well. But for both of you, when we were brainstorming, you both were saying that you've got quite a lot of clients at the moment, and historically you may have as well, that fit this profile of doing well at school, or reportedly everything is fine at school, but it doesn't look that way. So for you both, when you're thinking about this, like, why is this an important topic for clinicians to think about?
I think it's super important because firstly, you've said it's extremely common, particularly for the cohort of clients that we're working with as well. But I also think it comes up a lot because it can actually be super, I guess, disheartening for families. It often results in, a lot of emotions for families and caregivers as well when, let's say their child's experiencing a lot of challenges at home, and it might be, causing, potentially a bit of conflict at home as well. And then schools reporting actually everything's fine at school. They're doing really well at school. There's no issues. So I think it can be quite disheartening. And obviously we know the importance of thinking about regulation across the whole day.
Yeah.
So we really need everyone working together to support a child in all environments, even if in one particular environment they might be appearing to cope really, really well.
And I think on a practical sense, like, it may sound really obvious, but if we've got a child who, say, is presenting to be fine but not fine, and they're at school for 8 hours of a day.
Yes.
Like, that is such a long time for the child to be sitting in that discomfort or masking or having a really hard time. And we'll get into some of that later, I'm sure. But it's just a really, really hard thing for that child to be experiencing.
Absolutely.
And not to mention 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Yes.
45 weeks a year. It's a really long time.
Yeah. And we were thinking about earlier, like, what is it that leads schools to report everything is fine? And we were kind of brainstorming that there might be almost like two scenarios where we may have, like you said, and we might have a client that is masking or suppressing the discomfort or challenges that they're experiencing, and so school doesn't see it, and so on the surface their observable responses are communicating they're all good, they're fine, versus as well we were thinking about for some of our clients the teacher may not be placing even demands on a child to a point where they're not actually being challenged, so everything is going okay at school. Whereas these kids, you're working with them in therapy and you're like, actually, I know that they've got a lot of challenges within, literacy or handwriting or whatever it might be. But if the teacher has kind of figured that out, they're like, okay, well, I'll just pitch it at a level where they're okay. That's also not necessarily helpful.
Yeah, and I think that obviously comes with the caveat of we were saying earlier, like I could never be a teacher.
Yeah.
I simply couldn't do it. And I really
Yeah.
take my hat off to teachers. And
Yeah.
I also want to say that within those scenarios, like we're obviously assuming positive intent.
Yes,
In terms
absolutely.
of perhaps that teacher does think that, for example, I know this student does have a really hard time with literacy. So I am going to take some of the demands and some of the pressure off, meaning really well.
Yeah.
But then I guess when we do start to see that boredom or those challenges not being supported in the way that that child needs, it may not be necessarily, I guess, addressing it in the way that does support the child to then build those skills that they need or be supported
Yeah.
in the way that suits their learning profile.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really good point because teachers can be in a really hard position as well if they don't have the information that they need about a certain child. They might not know that there's the possibility that the child's masking.
Yeah.
So if they don't actually know, how this child might present in other environments or the family haven't explained that to them, it's it's kind of impossible to know that a child is actually masking if you don't have that information available. So I think that's really important to think about too, because we know that, there's 25 kids or upwards of 25 kids sometimes in a classroom, all with different needs. So yeah, I do think that's really important to consider as well, that it is a really, really challenging job to try and meet the needs of all children as well.
Yeah. When we think about when schools are reporting everything is fine at school, but it looks very different to home, what kinds of things are you starting to think of as clinicians that might be the things underneath the surface?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is masking, particularly when I know potentially how a child presents in a therapy session, in the community, at a soccer game, or at home as well. So that's something that I'm thinking a lot about, and I often like to talk to teachers about what do they know about masking already, and sort of exploring it in that way with teachers, to sort of find out, I guess, whether potentially it's something that they've thought about in the classroom or not yet.
Yeah, and I think breaking that down where you can even further, because maybe perhaps a teacher has an understanding of masking for a particular student, but your student presents very differently. I also find it really helpful to break that down and talk about, whether it's social challenges with executive functioning, challenges with the learning skills, literacy and numeracy, what is it that this child is needing specifically more support with, because it can look super different depending on the kid they're thinking about.
Yeah, and also having those conversations about why a child might actually mask as well, because I think, we're hearing about masking more, through Instagram and lots of different avenues and things, but I think sometimes people, and rightly so, might have a bit of a surface level understanding of it, but actually understanding why a child might do that and what are actually the repercussions, of masking for a child as well.
Yeah, well, we know for any neurodivergent child that if we are masking in one environment, it's usually coming at a cost to other things or in other environments as well. It's not sort of they just get in the car and they're like, yep, oh, good. Refresh, let's go.
Yeah.
So I think it's, I really like that point, Caity, around trying to understand the why, because for a lot of individuals that mask, it's a matter of safety for them. And we want to, if we're going down the path of supporting kids to unmask, it needs to be a collaborative discussion and journey around how do we help you to feel safe to do so, if that's what you want as well. But there are a lot of things at school that contribute to a child perhaps leaning into needing to mask as well. And sometimes we might more look, like you said, Em, at the if we take the OT lens of the PEO approach, like the person skills, the like the social, emotional skills, the executive functioning skills, the handwriting skills, whatever it might be. But it also might be environmental. There might be I go into one classroom, I'm like, whew, that's sensory overwhelm in there from 23 children. It's a lot as well. And then the task demands as well to think about. We often like to think as well when we talk about this experience of kids, for lack of a better term, kind of holding it together at school and then getting home and releasing, is we might think about it like a Coke bottle. Hello, Macy. She's doing her rounds. If you're watching along, there's our beautiful Macy dog. But the Coke bottle analogy of thinking about when you've got a Coke bottle or any soft drink really.
Lemonade.
And you've got the lid on, and every time a demand is placed that is beyond where you feel capable, or the sensory environment is overwhelming, or it doesn't meet your needs, it's like shaking that Coke bottle and not taking the lid off, just shaking and shaking all throughout the day. And then when we get home, it's taking that lid off. And that's often what we see a lot of families reporting, is they're like, soon as they get in the car, it is huge emotional outburst, explosive energy, because these kids have been holding it together at school. And I remember having a teacher one year, and she had reported, because the family had been reporting significant challenges at home with me for a long period of time. But every time I kind of connected with school, they're like, yeah, oh, good, she's doing really well at school. And then one day this particular teacher was doing kind of like, I don't know what the opposite to kiss and go is in the mornings, but in the afternoons she was kind of seeing kids off, and she saw this student see mum and immediately just lose it. And she was like, whoa, what happened? I've never seen that. And mum's like, oh, no, this is every day. And so helping teachers to see, and we don't want to put these kids in these situations where like, oh, you have to see it to believe it. That's unfair as well. But often families, like you said earlier, are going unbelieved or feeling really invalidated because what they're reporting is not aligning with what the school is seeing in the classroom.
And something that I like to do for that is either support the family to have a conversation about it, or I might be the bridge there sometimes. But looking at how the child presents at home during holiday periods, so when obviously school demands are reduced, versus what they might look like or what their participation looks like, in afternoons during the school term, and also at different points in the school term. So what does it look like towards the end of term or at the start of term versus what they might look like during the middle of the term? And I often find that that's quite helpful in just supporting the teachers to think about, okay, well, yes, there's differences in their participation, and that might be because of the demands across the day at school. So not that the teacher's doing anything wrong, but it's just acknowledging that being at school for this particular child requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of mental capacity to engage and participate, and that is having an impact at home as well.
Absolutely. And look, it's not always going to be possible for like every child as well, but I think where possible, having the child's voice involved in that, I've at least found like has been beyond valuable. And it's not to say like, you know, oh, this is what the teacher's doing a bad job with, or anything like that. But it's like, these are just the parts of my school day that feel really difficult for me that maybe the teacher wouldn't pick up on because they've got 24 kids to look after and they don't notice that this is actually really hard for the student. And a lot of the time when we've done that, and I guess as a practical example, whether it's with like an easy, tricky scale or kind of like sorting different activities across the day into easy, okay, hard, whatever that looks like. It's actually come back to the teacher and they've gone, oh, you know what, like I didn't realize lunchtime was so tricky for this kid, or I didn't know that this was a part of their day that they found hard. So adding that student voice where you can as well, I think is so valuable in those conversations.
Absolutely.
I recently did that with one of my kids, and it's funny because the school was kind of like, I did it a little bit in session, and then I was like, this could actually be really helpful for you to do with this student at school. And they're like, oh, I think like maybe it might be better coming from you. And I was like, okay, no worries. Like I'm happy to facilitate that and be that kind of middle person. But it also helped to kind of clarify and show school that the child's perspective is true to them. So this particular child reported that when they were having difficulty in the playground or socializing with their peers, that they interpreted, like the teacher had maybe made a passing comment about like, why don't you just go find somebody else to play with? But they interpreted that as, they told me to go and make new friends, but there is nobody else because I've been at this school for 5 years and I've maxed out kind of thing. There's nobody else. And it's funny because when I explain that to the teacher, they're like, they said that? And I'm like, that's how they've interpreted it, regardless of, if that was the intention or not. But helping our kids' voices come up in a way that really reflects their experience. Sometimes clinicians are really well positioned to do that.
It can also put a bit of a light on things that like are unseen. And I'm thinking of a particular client who we did the activity that I described before. And a few of the things that came up were things like asking for help, asking to go to the bathroom, things like that. And then when it was discussed with the teacher, it was, and understandably, it was like, oh, I thought they were going okay and they didn't need help because they weren't asking, and they're getting, their work's not terrible. And I'm not flagging that as a concern because they're getting by, but actually there were things that this kid needed help was, and that was one of the big barriers for them. So it can kind of just help uncover some of those unseen challenges too, I find.
I think as well, leading into that, like the fluctuating capacity as well, I think it's really important to talk about because sometimes teachers will think, oh, well, this child does sometimes ask for help, or they do sometimes request to go to the toilet. Yeah, so they can. But just because they can do it on one day doesn't mean they can necessarily do it every single day based on what's going on for them at that time, how much energy they have, how regulated they are. So I think that's also really important to talk about, and to talk about with our kids as well, to find out their perspective on that and potentially some things that might contribute towards that fluctuating capacity from their perspective.
Yeah.
On that note as well, something that we see a lot is that this is going to be really generalized, but often we might get reports from school that everything is not fine when we've got a child that may be becoming dysregulated, and communicating that in a way that is through like physical lashing out or verbally yelling or whatever it might be. But they're not the only kids that need support. Something that we lean a lot into is Dr. Ross Green's concept of lucky and unlucky kids. Did one of you want to kind of speak to that?
Yeah, I love this concept, and I love talking to parents and teachers about it as well, because I guess when you think about two students, so they're both having, let's say, experiencing the same challenges or finding the same thing really tricky, but they're communicating it in very different ways. So the lucky communicator might be going to the corner and crying, whereas the unlucky communicator might be, like you said before, lashing out, becoming physical, let's say swearing. And the only difference there, they're both experiencing the same challenges, might have the same sort of lagging skills, but the difference is that the way that they're communicating their challenge for one child elicits empathy from adults, whereas for the other child, it doesn't elicit empathy.
And usually triggers a stress response in most people.
Yeah. And then that can lead to adults responding in very different ways, even though both children might need, the same level of support as well.
Our lucky kids as well often probably kind of go through the roller coaster quicker. Like if you see a child crying, usually you're going to go over, console them, support them, and then they can probably return to a task sooner than you've got a child that's pushing over chairs and swearing and that kind of thing. And so again, like if you had those two kids, the teacher would probably lean more into, they're fine. Like sometimes get upset, but we can work on that, versus no, we're having a lot of difficulty with this other student.
Yeah. And that's particularly where those like lucky communicators or the children who mask can kind of slip through the cracks as well, because they're potentially not getting that support or that visibility, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Because that their needs don't appear as visible.
Yeah, or it might be perceived that, they've just got big feelings and big emotions, and it's perceived very differently. And I guess on the opposite end, where we've got those unlucky communicators, that's when it's seen through more of that behavioural lens.
Yep.
And, obviously we need children to be safe and everyone to be kept safe at school.
Yeah.
But we still need to come back to, like, what is the lagging skill that's causing this? Because
we don't just need a strategy to
Yeah.
manage the behavior that
Absolutely.
they're observing.
Yeah. And
Why
I
is it happening in the first place?
Absolutely.
Exactly. Like, what is this behavior communicating? What are they trying to gain or escape, or what's causing this? Because otherwise we're not going to fix the root problem,
Yeah.
which can, be an important conversation to go through with teachers and help them to understand that a bit better.
Often we need, unfortunately, families often need to go down diagnostic pathways to get the supports that their child needs, particularly in school environments or therapy related, that kind of thing. When we've got a family reporting one thing and school reporting completely opposite, i.e. everything's fine, how might that impact a family going down that diagnostic pathway?
It's a really good question, because I know for certain diagnostic pathways we might, or the allied health team as a whole might look down different things like parents screeners, teacher screeners, gathering that information from school. So I guess that's where that juxtaposition of information might make the picture, I guess, a little bit muddy at times. But also, I guess, if we are thinking about things like masking and fluctuating capacity, in a way it can show some information about that too.
Yeah, and I think part of our jobs as OTs, even though we're not on the diagnostic team, part of our role is actually speaking to that masking, to whoever the diagnosing clinician is, or whoever it is who's completing that assessment, and actually being like, yeah, I've observed this and this, the family consistently report this and this, because I think that's really helpful. And I think having those conversations with whoever is completing those assessments or heading it up is really important. And I'm finding more so that I'm often getting a lot of calls from these clinicians as well, which I really value too. But it's really helpful because you can have a pretty I don't know the right word, but like down to earth conversation about, what your understanding is of the client's presentation as well.
Yeah. And often if it's the pediatrician signing off on things, or if the family is linked in with a psych to do some assessments, but the psych doesn't really know the child like you've been working with them for 2 years, that kind of thing can be really hard when you have built up this really thorough understanding of how this child functions across different environments. But as an OT, we don't really get to have a huge amount of say in that diagnostic process. I think it's really important when we've got schools reporting everything is fine, to still push in and do classroom observations and that kind of thing, even if school doesn't necessarily see a need for it, because what we know of that child and what we're looking at is very different to how a teacher might be observing them in the class. And that can be hugely valuable when we're trying to diagnose as well.
Yeah. I think it's also the framing of that as well, though. I mean, in terms of trying to get into the classroom, get your observations sorted, how you're framing your purpose for coming in to the teacher or whoever's helping to organise that, in terms of, I am not here to tell you off or tell you what you're doing wrong or to give you critique as a teacher, because
I'm not
God knows I
assessing
couldn't
you.
do it. It is here to gather more information about how this child is functioning in this environment and how I can help as their OT, how we can work together to look at classroom strategies. I think the framing of that can be really pivotal in getting into the classroom in the first place.
I agree with that. And I think the other thing that I like to explain to teachers is that I'm going into the classroom, 60 to 90 minutes or, watching on the playground. The teacher, you don't have the opportunity to just look solely at one student for that period of time and just focus solely on their needs. So I think that can also be really helpful when you're having that conversation with the teacher, because of course you might see some things that the teacher is unable to see when they're super busy in that environment. The other thing that I'm finding really helpful, and I know this isn't related to the first question that you asked, Caity, but what I've started doing kind of as, I guess, a bit of my usual practice when going into a classroom now is actually, saying I'd love to have a chat with you about X, Y, and Z and collaborate around strategies. Do you have time in the classroom? Or I understand you're super busy. Would you be open to arranging a phone call after that observation? And I'm noticing most teachers are opting for the phone call. And I'm actually finding that it really helps to get on the same side from the outset, because you're not you're going in and you're saying, I understand you're super busy, so I don't expect you to give me heaps of time, but I'm hoping to find a time when you're free so we can actually have a really in-depth conversation about what you're seeing, what I saw, potentially what I know from, the home environment, and hey, how can we work together to sort of support this child? What is actually logistically possible from your perspective within the classroom as well?
I'm interested to know, Caity, how do you navigate when you do sit down with a teacher and all they report is, they're going really good, beautiful student to have.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that conversation?
Yeah. Well, I had this recently, and it was with a client in prep who I've been seeing for quite some time. And I went I observed the child in the classroom and on the playground. And I started the conversation by saying, I agree with you. What I observed in the classroom was that this child appeared to be doing really fine. I was actually surprised at how well he appeared to be doing. And I keep saying appeared because I know that coping on the outside doesn't necessarily mean that we're thriving or that we're okay on the inside. And so that's how I sort of explain that to a teacher. But I think actually going and saying, I understand exactly why you're saying that, because I observed the same thing, but this is what I'm potentially considering because I've actually seen this child participate in other environments in a very, very different way. So I, in that situation, have had a lot of success.
Great.
In that situation. What about you, Em?
I feel like you and I must approach these conversations really similarly in terms. Good job, by the way.
Yeah, well done.
Well done. I love what you're doing. But yes, in terms of that validation piece of I get it.
I agree.
I can understand why it looks like this kid's fine at school. I see that. And then I guess going in with that real curiosity of, same kind of things. This is what I know. This is what I've seen. This is what the family have told me. This is what the kids told me. What do you think? And approaching that with a genuine curiosity of what's your take on that?
Yeah. And I mentioned before, coping does not necessarily mean they're okay on the inside. But I think the other thing to consider and talk to teachers about is coping, but at what cost as well. So I think that's super important in terms of, okay, well, yes, they're and I hate this word, but yes, they are compliant at school in the classroom, or they're doing everything they need to do. They're following routines. They're sitting down for a child that in my sessions is, up the rock wall constantly doing all of these sort of things. But what that means is that when this child is getting home, he's having extreme meltdowns. And he's also from the get-go of getting home talking about how he doesn't necessarily want to go to school tomorrow because he's so anxious about the day. So again, it's not to make the teacher feel bad. It's to actually understand the whole picture. And yes, he looks like he's doing a really good job at school, but what is the cost of that across the week, across the school term, across the year, and across the whole kind of schooling journey as well?
Also, if you've got clients that are medicated throughout the day, like ADHDers that are on a stimulant medication, for example, can present so differently to when they're unmedicated. And I think that, and not that we want medication to ever kind of like fizzle their true personality or anything like that, but sometimes it can make things feel a lot easier for them whilst it's active. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're thriving as well. So also looking at, well, maybe they're appearing to be doing well at school because they've also got a medication that's active in their body, but school might be reporting, it's just that last half an hour of the day is a little bit tricky. Whereas 5 p.m., it's really hard for the family.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a consideration.
I think so too. And I think as well, like we've spoken a lot about like providing that education or having those collaborative conversations with teachers, but also kind of not going in already with what you think you're going to say, but, having a think about it beforehand. What are the things that I think I'm going to see that I might want to communicate to these teachers, and not just leaving it at that education and giving them that information, but also like working together to like come up with the so what of it all. Like, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
And being really realistic as well to, make it obviously super clear to the school that like I'm on your side. We both want what's best for this kid.
It's a team approach.
I don't want to ask for things that are out of your capacity and unrealistic. So what can we do in this setting? What can you do? What part of that could I take on in terms of building some skills in OT that may transfer to school, but also making sure those things are realistic. Otherwise, like if I was a teacher, I wouldn't be on side.
We did a whole episode on that recently around like actually being able to give teachers recommendations that matter and not just giving them 12 generic strategies. It's like actually let's give you one thing that you have reflected on and go, I can work that into my school day for you. Yeah.
Obviously it's very individual, but for these sort of clients where there's that potential for, high masking within the classroom environment, and school is saying, everything's fine. What sort of, strategies are you potentially thinking about?
That is such a good question. And I wish I could give you a really straight answer, but I feel like I'm going to talk in circles because I feel like it's obviously going to be so dependent on what the challenge is, right?
Yeah.
I guess in terms of if it's more around that socialization or the environmental stuff. So I don't want to not answer your answer. Not answer your question.
Not answer your answer.
No, I'm okay with that.
But I do think that's obviously going to be a big part of it, and not having those generic recommendations and going, I know this is what's really hard for this kid. For example, the sensory environment. So given I know this and I can see this is what's going on in the classroom, maybe I'm proposing some more proactive breaks or sensory downtime or working that into their schedule in a way that meets their needs a bit, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm coming like right back, but I do think it's a really important point as well when we're going down that, like supporting families to go down that diagnostic pathway as well. I think just the importance of like not falling into that we'll wait and see trap. And I know that pediatricians can often do that. They're like, oh, well, school sounds like it's going well, so let's just wait and see. But what we do know is that early intervention is effective. And if we've got a family that are like, no, like we really need to get these supports in place, I think really supporting that family to advocate to whoever it might need to be. Because yes, we've seen far too many times kids not be able to get the support that they need early on. And we know that that's a really important window in a child's developmental life, I guess, where building skills intentionally and therapy-related concepts can really be powerful as well. So I didn't want to skip that as
important.
Well. All right, practically speaking, before we finish up, if we've got clinicians that are, in this little spider web at the moment of I'm really struggling to work with this particular school because family is reporting something significantly different. Em, you mentioned earlier, like there are some really helpful resources available to families that clinicians should be aware of as well, in terms of like if they need support advocating to the school or that kind of thing.
Yep.
What kinds of things pop to mind?
So that would probably be more at that extreme end, of course, where maybe the family are really feeling unheard after a lot of trying. But services like the ACD, oh my gosh, I can never remember the full
Australian
Advocating for children with
disability.
disability.
Yep. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think
ACD.
a great resource.
A great resource. We just call them by ACD. But they obviously do a lot of work in the advocacy space for children with a disability.
Yeah, we'll pop the link in the show notes.
But I guess earlier stages, like I'd be thinking about, can we organise a time to potentially have an SSG or an IEP and
with therapists present.
With therapists present, absolutely.
Because it just gives more visibility to that child, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like even that
there is a team working on stuff around this child.
Yeah. And the child has like additional support. Yeah. And there's a reason for that.
Yes. And I think it's such a nice way to just discuss what some of their learning goals may be and the strategies that are already in place that you can celebrate with the teachers and say, awesome, I love this. That's a really great idea. I have a suggestion, maybe like to slightly tweak it and start to, I guess, individualize some strategies to the child a bit more with what you know about them. But it can be a nice way to slowly start to integrate with some of those tools too.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, going back to our point at the very start around parents and families feeling, a bit dismissed or disheartened when schools reporting something very different to what they're seeing at home. But those meetings and things can actually give the family a bit of a voice and to just explain what they're observing and to give them the space to also enable school to listen as well and for the child to have a voice as well.
Well, I was going to say for some clients, it's appropriate for them to actually be in attendance for a component of those kinds of meetings as well, if they want to be. But if they don't feel comfortable finding other ways for their voices to be included, maybe they want to write something that we can all look at or do that easy, tricky scale before it or that kind of thing, because the whole point is it needs to be collaborative with everyone working together.
Yeah, and it can be a nice way as well to, liaise with the broader school community as well. Like maybe you have the wellbeing staff member who's there or the AP or the principal or something. It can just be a nicer way to have some more people as part of that team.
Yeah.
And it also brings in that accountability as well as a therapist that, I've made some recommendations together as a team and it enables you to sort of touch base with them and review how those recommendations are going or strategies are going, and same for the school as well. It's like, okay, well, how did that go? How do you feel it went? And also checking in with the family and the child as well. Like, how has that helped you? Like, have you noticed that happening? Those sort of things, because it can help us to all be a bit more accountable rather than, doing a school observation, having those really great conversations, providing some really great recommendations.
And never going back.
And never going back, or never revisiting. So I like that accountability too.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me. We're going to wrap up there. So I will hopefully have you back on the couch in future, but we hope that this has been meaningful for any clinicians, not just OTs listening, and thinking about what it really means when we see schools saying everything's fine. So thank you, Caity. Thank you, Em.
Thanks, Caity.
I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Before we go, if you are a clinician looking for more support between episodes, KidLink has a range of services designed to build your clinical knowledge and confidence. KidLink Education is home to our on-demand, high-quality professional learning you can apply straight away into your practice. If you want access to monthly PD, group supervision, and our community of like-minded OTs to learn from and connect with, check out OT-Link. We also offer clinical supervision, which is designed to support your growth across professional, clinical, organisational, and personal goals, wherever you are in your career. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like, subscribe, and follow. It genuinely helps more clinicians find the show, which means a bigger community and more of us doing what we love. Thanks for listening.